My theory is that if you don't fail, you're not really testing your limits. You're not finding the limits of what you're capable of or what your talents might be. The world only changes because of people who are nonconformists. If you think a happy thought, you're a happy person. If you think an angry thought, well, you're an angry person. And so I try to teach my kids that what they think is what they are, and they can control that.
What's up, manifestation queens? This is your manifesty bestie. And you know what? The universe loves when we help each other out. So you've got to help a gal out. If you like my vibe, then please subscribe, rate, and review. But I'm not going to ask you to do this for nothing. No, I'm not. When you subscribe, you are going to do it manifestation style. You're going to subscribe and say, I am subscribing to my best life. And when you hit the 5 stars, say to yourself, 5-star life for me, because no manifestation queen wants a 4-star life. So thank you, queens. John Blakely, I'm about to get all up in your biz. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Contrary to most politicians today.
Have you ever actually been on the opposite side and been in the seat and had to raise your right hand as opposed to being the attorney?
Yeah, I was called as a witness a couple of times on different things, but rarely.
But rarely, yeah. Well, this is not a courtroom. And as folks will know, we've got 2 lawyers in the house today, in the studio today, but I promise this will not be stiff. This is going to be a great episode. And for the people out there that may not know, but I bet you do know, because you have heard John Blakely's name used so many times by his daughter, Sara Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx and now Sneaks. What a cool name. 2 great names. And the first time I heard Sara talk about you was this story that she told about when she was 16 years old and you went into her bedroom and you gave her Dwayne Dyer tapes. And her version of the story is that you said something along the lines of, I wish I got these earlier than now, which is 40. Where did that mindset for you come from? How did you get into that?
Well, as you know, being a parent is a huge responsibility. I took it seriously, and I tried to figure out exactly what I wanted my children to learn. I think all parents want their children to be as successful and as happy in life as you have been. Of course, in my case, I never expected them to be blowing off the map, but I was. So I did a lot of introspection, and then I listened to Wayne Dyer, read one of his books and listened to his tape. And then I decided, instead of trying to tell Sara about it, I just eliminate the middleman and have her listen to the tapes. So it worked because she really got into them, and she would say she was driving around in her car just listening to Wayne Dyer's tapes. And he was a very, very smart psychologist. That I think the one thing that I really liked I wished I'd learned earlier in life how to not care so much about what other people think, because when you really care what other people think, it's kind of like it stifles your own individuality and it makes you a conformist because you're afraid. The safe zone is to just do what everybody else does. But if you're not concerned about what other people think, then you'll go. And that's then morphed into my teaching the children not to worry about failure, but rather just try things. And that Sara quotes that a lot. Where around the dinner table, I would ask them what they failed at that day or that week. And if they didn't have a couple of good examples of something they tried and they failed at, I would be disappointed. That's the truth. My theory is that if you don't fail, you're not really testing your limits. You're not finding the limits of what you're capable of or what your talents might be. So that was genesis of that.
And was there anything in your life that got you into Dwayne Dyer, like was there anything that just sparked your curiosity, or was it just generally becoming a parent? Because I know even for me, becoming a parent, like Sarah, I've got 4 kids. They're 5 and under, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and twin boys. And every single morning we practice gratitude. So I ask them, I tell them what I'm grateful for, and then I ask them what they're grateful for. And my 3-year-old now, like, is able to just chime off anything. She's amazing, as is my 5-year-old. Now the twins are 20 months, so they can't speak. So we'll make up something for them. So was it just becoming a parent, or as you were growing up, were you interested in this? Were your parents into this also, or was it just something you picked up yourself?
No, I picked it up myself. I mean, I was raised in a Midwest family, and my father was a lawyer turned manufacturer, and my mother was a homemaker, and she was the strict disciplinarian, and my dad was a little more lenient. Um, but they stressed studies, and so I was pretty studious as a child. Um, but I mean, when Sarah was like, I would guess maybe 14 years old, 13 years old, it's at that point that I realized that, she needed a little good direction. So she had a tragedy or two happen to a friend of hers who got killed in a car accident and some other things. And so it was helpful really to have that pep talk from Wayne Dyer, really.
Yeah, she quotes him a lot, and she also talks about that failure at the dinner table, which I think is just a phenomenal way to parent, because it's obviously worked, because you don't have both of your children are successful entrepreneurs.
Yes.
You've got
Yeah.
Ford, who sold Zingle, and Sarah now is gonna kill it with Sneaks, which, by the way, you can't get in Ireland yet, so I'm waiting. I've actually had, you won't believe this, but I've had a few people contact me because I put up a little post about Sneaks on my stories saying, Yvonne, these are totally your vibe. So, I mean, even for her, I imagine going at it a second time could almost be more scary, because the expectation is that you're going to be successful. So there's almost more weight on your shoulders.
Well, I was talking to Sarah yesterday. First of all, she was, I don't know if you saw, you can probably see it on YouTube now, but she was on the CBS
Yeah.
Morning Show
Yeah.
with Gayle King. Did you see the clip on that?
I saw the clip, and then I saw Gail walking through the airport with the shoes
Okay.
still
Yeah.
on, talking to everyone. And I was like, these are phenomenal.
Well, I'll probably guess that the green shoes are sold out by now. When they were on the show, they showed the silver shoes, which I hadn't seen yet. That was a surprise to me, and they sold out immediately. So I guess they're going to have making more of those now. But yeah, it's kind of fun to see all this happen. And I told Sarah yesterday, I said, the really neat part is the thrill is back. When you're building Spanx in the very beginning, there was a great thrill every day to see what the sales were, or every week. And then every year it got better and better. And then after a while, it gets so big, some of the thrill is gone. And it's more about managing people and managing inventory and logistics of manufacturing. But right now, for Sneaks, the thrill is there. How many did you sell today? It's
Yeah.
sold out, and so it's all back. It's all back. Yeah.
Yeah, my sister lives in LA, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and buy a pair, send them to her, and then get her to post them to me. So I'll be the first Irish person to have a
Okay.
pair of Sneaks. So
Yeah.
that's for sure what I'm going to do. But in terms of going back then, I saw, I didn't know if this was the case, but I noticed that on some of Sarah's profile pictures, you had, and even one of yours on your Instagram stories, you had a picture of you at the Spanx board meetings. Did you attend those as a lawyer, or did you get involved that way?
Actually, for many years, Sarah called me her one-man board of directors, and I was.
Yeah.
Um, when Sarah started Spanx, she's a brilliant creative person, as you know, but she didn't have any business background. So as a lawyer, I did, of course. So she would call me and then I would guide her through a bunch of things from the very beginning on. And then after Spanx got a little bit bigger and she hired some people to run the company, well, she loves creating the product and doing the marketing, that side of it. Not so much detail for the accounting and she'll go to the manufacturer and make sure they're doing it right. But there's a lot of things that you have to delegate. So she started getting a staff, and then as it kind of morphed into the fact that about every other month I would fly to Atlanta and meet with Sara and her top people, operations people, and we'd ask them questions. And so that we did that for, I don't know, maybe the first 10 or plus years more. And that was fun for me. It was a great way to be with your adult daughter in a different environment than being the father. I mean, it was more like an advisor, and it's really fun to see her grow and become very knowledgeable about business. And I'd sit back sometimes and be just amazed at her intuition about things. I mean, she would pick up things so quickly. I'd love it if we go to a meeting. Well, early on, people wanted to buy her out, and I always counseled her not to sell. And she stuck to that for 20 years. And then she sold 3/4 of it to Blackstone a couple of years ago. But I'd love to go to some of these early meetings, and we'd be like at Goldman Sachs, and Sarah would be sitting there, and then she'd ask them a question that just cut right to the heart of the matter. I don't know where she came up with it, but they're all looking at it with wide eyes saying, oh my God, where did she come up with that one? But it was right to the heart of the matter, and they would have trouble answering the question. So then now we're not going to do it. So we go on to the next, keep the business for a few more years.
If you want to manifest your dream life, then what are you waiting for? Pause Penny has created an amazing manifestation box to help you manifest your dreams. It is backed by neuroscience. 7 simple steps, and the box tells you how to do it all. Grab your manifestation box at pausepenny.com and use the code podcast20 for 20% off. Yeah, and will you be involved in Sneaks?
She hadn't asked me to. I don't think she needs me anymore. She's learned so much by now, but it occurred to me when I agreed to be on this show with you, or podcast, and did you watch the Olympics?
Yeah.
Any part of it? Okay. So, in watching the pole vault or the high jump, that's a great example of what you should teach your children about how they should live their lives, because they're not afraid. I mean, the pole vaulter's not afraid of failure, but they keep putting the bar up higher and higher until finally they knock it down 3 times. And then they determine, okay, that's my limit, at least for this year, unless I develop something further. But that's the way, when you teach people not to fear failure, that is the way you should live your life, like it's a pole vault contest or a high jump contest, if you think about it. And then I thought about, okay, well, so why are people afraid of failure? And what do you think the answer would be?
Embarrassment, society.
Exactly, which goes back to Wayne Dyer, live your life without much concern about what other people think. The only reason that you wouldn't try something, unless you were trying to climb on a cliff or something, and your failure there might kill you. But for most of the things we're talking about, the only downside to failure is that you might to yourself feel some embarrassment from it, but you shouldn't, because you tried. Like Sara would say to me, failure is not trying, not succeeding. It's not succeeding.
Yeah, and I had on the neurosurgeon and neuroscientist James Doty, who's, he grew up in poverty in LA, and he went into a magic shop, and this lady kind of transformed his life. Like, he wasn't on the path to be a doctor at all. And he set up this Center for Compassion and Altruism in Stanford. And when he was on the podcast, because his book is actually going to be made into a movie in LA, he was talking about failure, and the people that are not afraid of failure have self-compassion. And it makes sense because if you have self-compassion and you're compassionate yourself, you're not going to berate yourself if you don't do something wrong. If you do something wrong. Like my son is 5, and the teacher was saying to me that he's a great little boy, but he's afraid to make a mistake. And I was thinking that's very unusual because I always say to him, mistakes are great for learning. And I heard
They
him,
are.
I said something recently and I was like, oh, and he's like, what's wrong, Mommy? And I said, I made a mistake. And he said, Mommy, mistakes are great for learning. So I do think, but what I would say, and like us as parents, and parents have such a huge impact on their children and on their mindset, but there's such a trickle on effect, right? So you have this massive impact on your kids, Sara and Ford, and you teach them around the dinner table about a positive mindset and failure and how great it is to fail and being your authentic self. But what you might not know is that Sara has inspired someone like me, a lawyer, to talk about manifestation on LinkedIn. I don't even talk about law on LinkedIn. I talk about the universe and manifestation. And I'm like, well, if Sara Blakely, the billionaire Spanx founder, can talk about talking to the universe, well then Yvonne Trackian, lawyer, can talk about it. But initially it was a bit hard because us lawyers, we're seen as pretty formal and stiff, and we've got a reputation. But the reality is, once I put it out there, it's funny. It's the lawyers, the general counsels, some CEOs that are in my private messages saying, I love this. Because they're all type A, go, 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 do
Yeah.
it.
Well, you're breaking the mold, Yvonne. So, like I told my kids, you got to break the mold. Not only the world only changes because of people who are nonconformists. You think about that, okay? So people who are conformists, like I said earlier, that's because it's a safe zone for them. There's nobody going to criticize you if you're just like everybody else, right? So if you step out of that safe zone and pursue your own authenticity, like you said, and become your true self, then you're probably going to become, to some extent, a nonconformist, but only nonconformists change the world. Otherwise, we just be stuck status quo all the time, right? So
And
you're
we
good.
and
You're doing it,
we'd be
breaking the mold for lawyers. That's great. But as a lawyer, you learn more from your mistakes. I surely did. When I would have a trial and I'd lose a trial, I knew exactly maybe what I should have done differently. But if I win, sometimes you don't really know exactly what it was that caused you to get across the finish line first. Um,
completely. You only really learn along the way when you're making the mistakes. So I
yeah.
think it's the best life lesson to teach our kids and for the audience that are listening. Like, go for it, try it, make the mistake. Do you have any regrets doing law, or are you glad you chose that as a career path?
I went to law school not really with an intent to become an attorney, or at least practice law. And when I graduated from law school, my father said, well, why don't you work 2 years as a lawyer so that everything that you learned in school, well, you'll see the application of it. Well, that was a good suggestion. And since he paid for my education, I decided to follow his advice on that. And then I guess what happened was I got captured by my own success. I became successful as a lawyer out of the gate pretty. Uh, so then, I was married and had Sara, and then I had a son and I had responsibilities. So I stuck with practicing law forever. But I sometimes wonder what would have been different if I had pursued some other career, but it didn't happen.
It
I'm
was
happy.
You're happy. Was there anything in particular that you loved or would have been interested in? Do your kids get their entrepreneurship, do you think, from you or from their mom or a bit of both?
Kind of runs in the family. My father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. Um, On the maternal side, there were two entrepreneurs. So it runs throughout the whole family. In one respect, I guess I was an entrepreneur because I started my own law firm that's grown to be one of the larger ones in Central Florida. But I don't know. It's just so to answer your question about something else I would have done or would have preferred to do. I was really good in the sciences and in math, and to the extent that I went to Duke University, and when I was in my, I think, junior year, I switched to economics and decided I was going to get in that and become a businessman and learn economics and the rest of that, and then morph into law. But the dean of students at Duke wrote my parents and said, "This is a big mistake. Your son has a great aptitude in the sciences, and he should stay there." But I didn't. My dad says, "Well, John, pursue what you want." But now, later in life, I wished I had been a scientist. I mean, there's so many exciting things happening, discoveries through the Webb telescope. And by the way, I had dinner one night with James Webb. His daughter was a friend of mine at Duke, and he came down and I had dinner with him. But in chemistry and biology and everything, and medicine, there's the problem with being a lawyer, at least maybe it's not so true. Well, I don't know what exactly specialty yours is, but as a lawyer, you deal basically with abstracts. You never, like a cabinet maker. A cabinet maker can stand back at his cabinet, look at it and say, "I did this," and it's there forever. I mean, maybe, and be proud of it. As a lawyer, you know what? You have thoughts and arguments, but there's nothing to stand back and take a look at.
Yeah.
So,
What I would say is, so I'm actually a lawyer for a NASDAQ listed company, Irish Incorporated, NASDAQ listed, called Prothena Corporation PLC. And we focus on we're looking at Alzheimer's, we're looking at Parkinson's, we're looking at some rare diseases. So although I'm the lawyer and I'm not the scientist in the lab, I feel like there's a lot of purpose there because
okay.
we're trying to get it out to patients, and we're doing our best. And I get a lot of exposure to kind of the business side because I sit on the board as the company secretary. But you do have a lot of purpose in law, because I was reading about, and I'll let you tell it, about your phenomenal baby switching case. And that case, I'll let you describe the facts, but I think that there's a lot of purpose there.
Well, you're right. In that one case, there was. So what happened was I got a call from a lawyer who said that there was this couple that they had a child at a small rural hospital in Florida. And when they were checking out of the hospital, they were told that the child had a congenital heart defect and would need to have a heart perhaps transplant at age 10. So at age 10, the child was raised and kind of always kind of a purplish tinge to her skin because of the poor circulation by the bad heart. But age 10, they went up to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, and we're doing the preparatory work for a heart transplant. So they have to check the parents' blood types and the child's blood types to find an appropriate donor for the donor heart. And during that testing, they came in and they called my clients in a room and they said, "Well, we have some very unusual news for you." And they said, "We determined that Arlena was the girl's name they raised, is not your child." So, and then they quickly said, "And no, Mr. Twig, she's not Regina's child either. Neither one of you, mother or father, or the parent of this child." But the child by now was sort of in desperate shape, so they had to go ahead with the surgery the next day anyway, which they did. And then unfortunately, the child died as a result of the surgery a day later. So then the question was, well, where is our real child? And that started up a big hunt. And they hired a lawyer up in Maryland, and he he got the case on the cover of Time magazine and everything, filed this big lawsuit. And then he erroneously concluded that there was nothing in it for him because there would be no financial recovery possible under Florida law. And so he basically dropped the case. And then maybe a week or a month later, somebody called me up and said, "Hey, John, maybe you can figure out a way around this law and get these people some compensation and help them, find their child." So in the meantime, so I did, and I found, I won't call it a loophole, but the other lawyer missed some nuances of the law that allowed me to have a viable case for them. So in the meantime, then the real child is found. The media, after the big thing in the Time magazine, the media just got into this, and they determined there was really only one other white baby girl born in the hospital at the time. So it had to be her, and they tracked her down, and she was living in Sarasota, Florida. And she was being raised as Kimberly Mays. And so my clients reached out and said, "Hey, we would like to see our daughter," and whatever. And eventually that the man and woman, their name was Mays, the ones that thought they were raising their own child, she died 2 years after delivery. So the man, his name was Robert Mays, was raising my client's child as an only child. And so he wasn't going to let go of her, of course. And he didn't really want my clients to have anything to do with their own biological child. And that set off this huge case. I didn't really want to be involved, and I was sort of like the lawyer that tried to get him compensation, which I did ultimately, got him a lot of money. But then they asked me to represent them in trying to get at least visitation, if not custody, of their own child. And so I represented them in that effort. And that became an internationally famous case. And the thing that was so strange, well, not strange, but unfortunate about it was that because one child had a congenital heart defect and the other child didn't, there was a motive to switch the babies. Normally, there wouldn't be a motive for a baby swap, but in this case, there was. And my client was dead certain that there was an intentional switch there. And it really got exacerbated. Early on in the case, we were on Oprah Winfrey show. I was on Oprah Winfrey show with my clients, and she was asking me to describe, some of the incidents that I've just talked about with you now. But then she said, "Well, how did you learn there was a switch?" And because they didn't have DNA testing back in those days. They had HLA, which determined your antibodies, which was somewhat good. But so we got into it, and after I got the hospital records, I saw that my client's child had on the weight chart had a certain weight, let's say 5 pounds, and the other child had a weight of 6 pounds. And then one day, all of a sudden, they're transposed. So all of a sudden, the other child has got the 6 pound and 5 pound or whatever. So I figured that'd be the day that the switch occurred. And so I'm describing this on the Oprah show, and then I said, it's kind of remarkable because it happened on the 4th day after the other lady had delivered her child. And so we were somewhat surprised that after 4 days of having her own child and breastfeeding her child, that she would not recognize that another child was brought to her. And at that point, there was a commercial break on Oprah's show, and all the women in the audience were screaming. Sure, they had to be intentional. Because every woman there who was a mother said, after 4 days, you surely know what your child looks like, everything. And so then Oprah got real concerned about it while we were still in commercial break. She said, "Okay, now listen, we can't talk up." She was worried about some legal issue. I don't know why, but
Yeah. Like I'm the lawyer
but
here.
at any rate, she encouraged she said, let's not discuss this when we come back on the air. So it was not discussed on the air, but of course, then my client got the confirmation that she needed, that this really was intentional, which really made it difficult to ever work out a visitation program with the man that she thought was responsible for kidnapping her child and giving her the other child that she ended up loving, of course, but she died. And that was basically that story. It became, I mean, it was, Yvonne, it was just wild. I mean, so what happened, another thing that happened was the, the big issue was biology doesn't mean as much as raising, environment. So all the adoption agencies in the country, in the world, were fighting against my clients having any right to their own child
Hmm.
because they wanted adopted children to be on equal ground with biological. I understand that, but it was kind of violating my clients' constitutional rights to their own child. And I mean, I ended up getting death threats. The sheriff had to have me park, a couple blocks away from the courthouse, and then take me in a squad car to the courthouse because there were death threats called in
What
against my
death
client and
threats?
me
Why
for
though? Because
for,
because they felt
for
compelled to be on the
pursuing their own
side.
child. Yeah, I mean, it got yeah,
It's
it
really
was
the biological parents and the child, but the biological parents that would have, in reality, suffered the most because not only did they raise and love a child that died of a congenital heart defect, they then missed out on another child.
yeah, they missed out on their actual child, and then so then the media was against my clients. They went out of their way to cast them in the worst light they could. I later learned that the primary reporter from Florida, from whom he'd write the stories and the AP would pick it out so it would go around the country and around the world. Um, I didn't realize it at the time. I was told later that he has two adopted children. So he was prejudiced in his reporting. But nobody, I mean, it was hard to get people to see my clients. You're right. I mean, it's their own child. And then everybody would say, and again, the media would say, oh, you need to do what they need to do what's in the best interest of the child. And so, it should be decided by the best interest of the child, not biology. And then I would say, which they never reported, I would say, look, I don't disagree, and my clients don't disagree that this should be decided in the best interest of the child. But the real issue is who decides. I mean, it's not a mathematical formula of best interest. I mean, should it be my clients who have a biological connection to the child, or these other people, or other man who raised the child, but he doesn't have and so that was the real one of the real tough arguments there was who decides the best interest for the child. Um,
The court, I guess, has made that decision. What decision did they ultimately make?
well, the interesting. I knew that we were going to be hometown. By that, I meant that the judge was under a great deal of pressure in his hometown to side in favor of the man who'd raised the child because that's where the case was.
Mm.
So I prepared my clients to the fact that we were going to lose at the trial level on any visitation or custody issues. But my clients had several other children. So I said, our best shot here is to have the other children testify and look at by the time that the girl's now 10, and actually by the time I went to trial she's probably 12. So I said I want to put them on the witness stand, even though they're not material in too many different ways, but I can get them on the witness stand. I want them to look at their sister
Mm.
and tell them what they do. They play hopscotch, they have dolls, they're about their lives, and say it'd be fun to get to know you and have you come and be with us a lot. And my strategy was that maybe someday she would think about that and want to come and be with my clients and their family and their siblings. And so after we lost the case and the trial judge ruled that my clients had no right to their own child, I filed the appellate briefs. I was very confident, by the way, that we would win ultimately because there were many United States Supreme Court cases that say that biological parents cannot be denied the right to raise their own children unless they either voluntarily put them up for adoption or they abandon them or they severely abuse them. But absent one of those three reasons, you cannot terminate the rights of a biological parent. And so I was very confident, almost 100% sure that this decision by the lower court would be reversed and my clients would end up getting custody or at least extended visitation with their child. But maybe 6 months after I'd filed the briefs and we're getting ready to go to the next, get in the appellate court system on it, Kimberly, the girl who was my client's biological child, ran away from the man who had raised her and ran to my clients and lived with them. And so it was a happy ending that way. As a lawyer, you can understand, I was a little bit frustrated because I really wanted to have the Supreme Court make a firm declaration that even under these circumstances, that should be the law. I kept saying, look, what would happen if this girl, if she was the Lindbergh's kid being kidnapped and then sold to somebody else and they raised the child, the Lindbergh child, for 10 years, and then it's discovered. Are they going to say the Lindberghs can't have their own child back? Remember that famous kidnapping case from the 30s or whatever it was. So it was a really interesting case. I think it sort of made court TV, frankly. I mean, court TV televised the thing for 2 straight weeks, and it was telecast around the world, basically.
And you're this, I wonder, were you on Oprah before Sara or after her?
Oh, well, before, 20 years before.
So you were the first
I was
Blakely.
on Oprah a couple of times. I was on Oprah at least 2, maybe 3 times on that case. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And,
yeah.
you've got Oprah on direct dial then.
She won't remember me. She'll remember the case, but she would not remember me. But yeah, I was on a lot of news. I was on everything, Barbara Walters had a 1-hour special on the case.
It's a fascinating case. Did you ever understand, like what I read when I was doing a little bit of research on it? It was kind of going to the fact that in the hospital, your client, so the biological parents, had a number of children, and then the people that got the healthy child had no children and may have struggled to have children. So it was suggested, and I don't know if this is accurate, it was suggested in this article that I read that the doctors wanted felt sorry, say, for the couple that could have no children and kind of came to the conclusion that, well, this other family have 5 kids, so you know what, let's just switch them and give this lady a healthy baby. Is that, do you think it happened by the doctors, or was there any sort of criminal case taken?
No criminal case was ever charged. And I mean, sitting here today, do I think it was intentional? Yes, I do, because there was a motive and because of the circumstances of the switch happening 4 days after the other lady had her child. And each child at delivery they had put an armband and a wristband and an ankle band on them. So in order for the switch to happen by accident, all 4 bands would have to come off at the same time, and the child and somehow go over to the other bassinet and be put on the other child. And then of course, everybody wanted their moment of fame, and some nurse came out on her deathbed and said, yeah, it was an intentional switch. I did it because the doctor asked me to do it. And yeah, the theory you just said about the other family didn't have any other children and having trouble having a child, and this child was not going to make it probably. So yeah.
Do you think the parents knew of on the side of not your client's side, the ones that she would have?
Well, I think the mother had to know, but she died 2 years after it happened. Now, whether or not the man knew, I don't know.
But
I just don't know about that.
and from the flip side, though, wouldn't your client have known after 4 days that her baby looked different?
Well, but her baby was born only 2 days before the switch occurred, not four.
Ah, mm,
And so then, in fact, she questioned it. When they brought her the other baby, she said, I don't think this is my baby. And the nurse said, well, yes, it is. Look at the armband, look at the wristband. I mean, the wristband, the ankle band. So she looked at
ah,
him and said, you're just wrong. This is your child. Okay.
makes so much sense. Yeah. So only 2 days before. So what a wild case. That's a really, really interesting one. So the Blakeleys are all over the news. My goodness. Did
Well,
you?
not me so much anymore.
Well,
Thank God.
now that you're on my podcast, All Up in Your Biz, you better be careful. People are going to be reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, do you want to come on my podcast?" And you're going to say, I'm one and done. I only went on Yvonne." And
There you go.
the folks that are tuning in, they're going to wonder, how did an Irish gal with no connection to John Blakely or Sara Blakely manage to get John Blakely's cell phone number, email address, house address? What was it? What was it?
Well, I told you, but first of all, I get a lot of people that contact me, and of course, Sarah gets so many requests
Hmm.
to be a speaker here and there, and to be on this show and that show and everything. So she has to limit it, and otherwise she'd have no time for her family or her business. But so then a lot of people, clever like you, they write to me. I
Yeah.
guess I can find me because I have been a lawyer and I'm out there. So um, I get it. You're not the only one who's ever done that, but I was taken by you because you sort of explained. You're like Sarah. You're a mother of four children, young children, and you're a lawyer. I love that. And then you're working in your motivation area. So manifestation. I thought I was taken. I said, okay, I'll do that for Yvonne.
And just so people know, when I reached out, and I think this is the way kind of manifestation and mindset and the universe works, right? When I reached out to you, well, first of all, I have this kind of 7-step manifestation process where you write it down in in your manifestation box, which I'm going to send you after this call. I'm going to send you a little box, send you a box for Sarah and the kids as well. And I'd written it down, so it was constantly focused on my mind. And I reached out to you, and then I totally forgot because, sure, I didn't think that John Blakely would respond to Yvonne Trakian. So on a Sunday, I sent it on a Sunday, and I got a response back about a week later on a Sunday. And I was like, oh my God, look at this. Because in the message you had said, send me your number and Sarah will call you. And I nearly died. And my husband said to me, Yvonne, when Sarah calls you, please, for the love of God, just act like a normal person. And I said to him, no, I won't, because it's not normal for Sara Blakely to call you, right? Anyway, I now look back and I realize she didn't call me because she's busy with sneaks, but I'm still manifesting, right? But it's when you let go, you just know it's all gonna work out, and I think as well, it reminds me of when she talked about wanting to meet Richard Branson, Sarah. And I was listening to her in a podcast, and it was so funny because she said she sent you the contract of she was going to be on the show, Richard's show, and it's kind of like Shark Tank, but effectively you have to do all these tasks, or you're fired. You have to do all these tasks if you lose. And she sent you the contract, and you said something along the lines of, no sane person would sign this contract, Dad.
Exactly. But she did anyway.
but she did it anyway. But you told a great story earlier about how raising kids, that you're looking at the pole jump and all of that, and you're raising the bar, and she was talking about this particular task that she had to do, and effectively she had to do some sort of jump, and instead of looking like into the guy's eyes, she looked above his head. So she said, I jumped higher than the rest of the people. And I think, and then she made it across and was like one of the only people to make it across. I might not have this story 100% accurate, but there's so many little threads of what you're saying that I can see come out in her own stories. Was there anything else that you did as a parent when they were kids that you could kind of remember of just helping them along with their mindset, or anything you would recommend?
But first, I want to give you a little more detail on that jump that you talked about,
Yeah.
Sarah, looking up. So, I mean, Branson Dahl, this is the Rebel Billionaire show, and Sarah was on it. Ironically, she did become a billionaire ultimately. But on this one thing, they had a guy sort of, there was a like 1,000-foot cliff, and this guy was somehow out here on a crane, and the contestants had to jump from the top of the cliff out and catch this guy. And if they didn't catch him, if they didn't latch onto him, then they would fall. They had bungee cord on their feet. They would fall like 900 feet down into this gorge where I forgot what country it was in. And they show these people jump and you go, shoot, they're gone. So I couldn't believe, I mean, Sarah is really gutsy in that way. She's a real risk taker. And so she did what she was one of the few that didn't have to take the deep plunge there. The craziest story was in the very beginning, Branson, he's a hot air balloon guy, and he took Sarah up on a hot air balloon, and then she was suspended on a rope, and she had to climb up. She was 10,000 feet up in the air over England somewhere, and she's on this rope hanging below the basket, and she had to climb. Oh no, she's in the basket, but she has to jump out of the basket with this rope on, and then climb up to the top of the balloon. And so she's there doing this, and she finally gets to the top of the balloon, and Branson is sitting on the top of the balloon with a table and drinking tea, and Sarah's supposed to sit down and drink tea with him. So she gets to the top, and she's exhausted and elated that she made it, and she's stepping over to the table, and at the top of a hot air balloon, there's a hole where the hot air goes up through. And when she stepped, her foot went down there, she was going to go plummet right down to the middle of the hot air balloon and burn up. And somebody grabbed her, fortunately, and saved her life and pulled her back up. And that was that crazy episode.
And she needed a drink, an alcoholic drink in that tea after that. Not a cup of tea. She needed a cocktail up there.
I'm sure. But to answer your question about other things that I may have taught the kids, and I would recommend this to any parent. I always believe that you should stay somewhat close to nature. Being close to nature kind of helps you stay grounded and happy, and puts yourself in a relative perspective to the world. And it's good. I think it's very good and healthy. And I try to teach them to live in the present moment, which is very difficult in this day and age. But even then, 40 years ago, I was teaching it to Sarah and her brother Ford. By the way, thanks for mentioning his name. He's been very successful too. He learned the same stuff. But if you live in the present moment, you get a lot more out of life. And the way you can tell if you live in the present moment is you can remember what you did a week ago and in any detail to it. But some of the things like Sarah would do, I mean, obviously she'll remember those forever. That's living in the present moment. Now, I'm not saying you have to climb to the top of a hot air balloon to live in the present moment, but there are other ways to do it. But you should, you can train your mind to live in the present moment. And And when you're talking to people, it's just everything. Also, I think there's a concept that a psychologist named Maslow had about B cognitive thinking. You know what I'm talking about there?
No.
B cognitive thinking is where you look at things without judgment.
Mm.
So, like if you're looking at an old, very gnarled tree, instead of thinking that that's a very ugly tree, you'd think, well, I wonder how it got that way and wonder about the history of it. And so you're not passing judgment on saying it's an ugly tree. It's just, it's interesting and you're going to think about it. And same thing could be about people, instead of passing judgment on people, think about how they got that way or why they're acting that way, or maybe try to understand them. It's a great way to live your life to the fullest, I think.
Yeah, I saw somebody post on LinkedIn once a phrase that they heard from Jesse, Sarah's husband, and it said, "Be where your feet are." So effectively, if your feet are here in a podcast studio talking to John Blakely, be present. If your feet are with your kids in your breakfast room, be with your kids as opposed to on your phone. If you're in work, be in work. And I thought that was a great
Yeah.
reminder for me because even as a parent, I'm juggling and I'm trying to get things scheduled. And it's a reminder, especially as my kids are small, to try and be careful about the distractions of work because it is a juggle. It certainly is a juggle.
Yeah, there's so much going on today. It really is. I mean, I guess I'm glad I'm old sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's not, and I say, uh, you either get older or you don't. So it's a privilege, right? It's a
Yeah.
it's a privilege.
And so my mindset is still young. Basically, if you think about this and think about it twice, so you get it, you are what you think. All you are your thoughts, right? So that's part of your manifestation. But if you think a happy thought, you're a happy person. If you think an angry thought, well, you're an angry person. And so yeah, I try to teach my kids to think, realize that what they think is what they are, and they can control that. Only you can control your own thoughts. So you can make yourself a happy person if you want to,
Yeah,
and a successful person.
and
So
successful. And final question: um, what do you want to instill in your grandkids?
the same things we've just been talking about,
Yeah,
you know. I think my children are raising my grandchildren in a wonderful way. I think they're going to be happy and successful kids. So I don't, I'm very happy with the way things are going.
yeah. Oh, sorry, I had one final question. Are you grateful Sarah didn't pass the LSATs and didn't become a lawyer?
Uh, yeah, I think I am,
Yeah, we
but
need her in the world as a woman entrepreneur
yeah,
fighting for us and fighting for women. We have enough female lawyers. We need Sarah. That's what we need. So I'm grateful.
by not being an attorney, it opened up a lot more avenues for her to be influenced and make change in the world, in my view. So it was really good in that
Yeah.
regard.
John, I just want to say how grateful I am that you responded to a message from a random Irish lawyer gal. And I am so grateful for your time. I really, really appreciate it so much.
Well, please don't give my email or phone number away.
No, I won't. That is absolutely confidential.
Okay.
Absolutely not. But I'm just so grateful to you and thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.